We're going to see if there's any lambs left, or if they've all been eaten, taken away to be eaten. I've not been through this field in about a week, so she will see. Talk about myself in the third person. I will see. Oh, I can see that it's still some left. Oh, that's nice. Good. Sugar. I was in a shop yesterday. I was in a charity shop yesterday, and I walked into it. There was no one else in there apart from the woman bitch behind the counter. And I walked in, and as soon as I walked in, she looked at me, and then she shouted through to the back. There's people in the back, sorting out the clothes or whatever it is that they're doing. And she shouted through, "We've run out of dog biscuits. We better get some more in case any dogs come in." With emphasis on the dog, And I've mentioned this before, that they refer to me as a dog. When they came into my... There's the wind picking up now. When they came into my home and showed me all these videos that they had of me. Hello! And when I say they, I'm talking about Andrew Fitzpatrick. I'm talking about a man named Eddie Gordon. I'm talking about the police officers. I'm talking about Eddie Gordon's niece, whose name is Tanya Rowlands. I'm talking about Christian Forsyth. I'm talking about Michelle Cunningham. I'm talking about Derek Brown. I'm talking about Tara Maguire. And others who I don't actually know their names. But that's who I'm talking about when I say they. When they came into my house and showed me these videos, they told me that I was referred to as Brewdog because in the army, when I was in the army, I did nothing but make brews. I mean brews as in BREWS, which means cups of tea or coffee. So they get dog references in all the time. You'll have seen my videos with, going past with vans that say dog on them. Or is that better for the wind? Maybe. Don't know. They just create the wind when I start speaking. They don't want me to talk. So dog, the dog is used quite a lot. They obviously think it bothers me. Call me dog all day long. I don't really care, it's not, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't affect me in any way, but they obviously think it does. So yeah, that's what they said. That when I was in the army, all I did was make cups of tea and coffee. So my name was Brewdog, because that's all I achieved. Now, the only time that I've ever said anything about my time in the army was on my CV. Obviously, I've wrote it on my CV because it's part of my work history. But it's never been a bragger. I've never claimed to have done wild and wonderful things in the army. I've never gone out of my way to tell stories about my adventures in the army. It was just a really, really small part of my life, a few years of my life, and it wasn't that fucking entertaining, to be honest. And the only reason that I joined the army was to get away from home. I wanted an escape from the environment that I was living in. That was the only reason, because it took me away. It took me out of that. I had no deep-seated, long desires to, join the army since I was a child. It wasn't the case. I wanted a way out, an escape, and that's why I did it. So for them to refer to me as a Brewdog or dog constantly, it shows that, just the sheer jealousy. The obsession with me anyway. These people are obsessed with us, but it's an obsession and it's a jealousy as well. They obviously think of me being in the army as some great achievement that they never managed in their own lives, and they want to try and kind of put me down and tear down what it was that I did. I'm going to have to go around this way. There's lots of cows over there. I walked past them the other day and they got really startled, and of course it startled me, and I thought I'm going to end up trampled by cows. Yeah, but they obviously think it is some kind of, massive achievement, so they want to tear into it. But it's never been the case with me. I've never gone out of my way to say anything to anyone, to brag about anything, So this is in their own heads. This is them, trying to it's just jealousy, isn't it? Sheer jealousy. And I don't know, I listened to a lady called Stephanie. Her channel's called Stephanie the Seeker. And she says in it, she says quite often something that's really, really true. And whenever I'm feeling down, I always try and remember this in my head, that, if we weren't strong people, you and I weren't strong, it wouldn't take an army to come against us. They wouldn't need this many people. If we were weak, if we were cowering in the corner, sitting in a corner, rocking back and forth, already broken, it wouldn't need all these people. They wouldn't need so many of them. They need so many of them because they're weak. And they're weak because, like I say, they try and drag down what they perceive as achievements. I don't even perceive them as achievements. I don't perceive joining the army as an achievement. I really don't. The army will take any kind of shit. They take any kind of fucking retard. And I take myself as proof of that. The people that I joined with, the people that I worked with when I was there, if I wanted an easy life, if I was a yes person, if I did exactly what someone in a funny costume told me, I would have stayed in the army, got free food, free accommodation, decent wage, a free costume and a job for the next 22 years. I would have stayed. But I'm not a yes person. I'm not a fucking idiot, The people that do best in the army are the bigger the fucking idiots, the better they do. The bigger the dummy who can say yes and doesn't talk back and doesn't have a fucking brain in their head, the longer they stay. And the army love that kind of shit, They do. They don't like people like me. They don't like people like me who question things, who can see that people do very little fucking work, that it's just a fucking organisation and it's bullshit, with their silly rules and their people doing fuck all for a living, basically. That's what I've seen. But that's why they recruit out of schools. They want fucking 16-year-old, 17-year-old dummies. And I was one of those 16, 17-year-old dummies that didn't know any better, but I learned quite fast that I wasn't as much of a dummy as some of them. Some of them were really, really fucking dummies. And those ones were the ones that are still in now, or if they're not in, then they've done their 22 or 25 years and now they've got out and now they're living in reality, the real world, which isn't as fucking easy. Good morning, cows. They're very friendly, these. They usually come up to the fence. That's an electric fence, but if I go to the gate, oh no, there's a thing across the vista down there. Sometimes they'll come up, won't you? Sometimes you come up and say hello. You don't want an electric shock, do you? You don't want to get too close to the fence. Hello. When I go to the gate, a bit down there, they usually come up and I'll give him a stroke, but he's going to get a shock if he comes too close. Don't come too close. I know you're very cute. I'll see you maybe. See you in a couple of days. So the fact that they have to, mock my what they term achievements, it just shows you how absolutely jealous they are. And these will be the same people, like I said, well, like Stephanie the Seeker says, they need so many people to come against you, so many people, and you need to remember that when you're feeling down, that if you weren't strong, they wouldn't need that. They would come to you one-on-one. The person who originally had the problem with you would come to you one-on-one, but they won't, because they're weaklings, and they're scared of you, They're scared of you. They're cowards. That's why they need so many. It's why you see them driving about in their cars. They've got a car to protect them, or if they're walking about, they're usually in pairs, or they'll be on the phone. They'll be on the phone on speakerphone, someone has protection in the background. But they're cowards. They're absolute cowards. That's why they have to be in groups. But these will be the type of people that, have never achieved anything in their own life. So they try and shit on your achievements. So there'll be, for example, a man that was living off his rich girlfriend, doing nothing but just living off of her money taken from her, basically, a leech. Or, you know, a man who did nothing, achieved nothing, is still living in the same town that he grew up in, but his siblings, you know, went and got degrees, and he's selling drugs for some criminals now and just being grooming children. Or, you know, some silly bitch who was abused by her uncle when she was a child and then is going on to do nothing but marry into a criminal family and do makeup and hair for a living. That'll be the type of people that take part in this, you know. They've done nothing with their lives, so they just want to shit on what it is that you've done. The other thing is, you know, like Stephanie says, I don't want to steal all her, what's the word? I can't think. All her chat. I don't want to steal all her chat, but she says some really good things. She's really motivational, you know, and she's really smart with what she says. Motivational and smart. She knows what she's talking about. Go for that one. But she says, if you were a bad person, you know, if we were bad, if I was bad, if you were bad, we would be on their side. You know, they are on the side of badness. So don't think that, you know, don't believe what it is that they say about you. Because they are the cunts. And they would love for us to be on their side, because we would be the strength in their side, but they couldn't ever have us on their side because we are the speakers of truth. And we ask questions and we wouldn't participate. You know, the amount of targets that I've listened to, I know that they're good people and they wouldn't participate in this kind of shite. They just wouldn't get involved in it, you know. I don't claim to be a good person in saying that, you know. I don't claim that I'm some kind of saintly, some god type. I don't at all. I've got a temper on me. I've done some shitty things in the past. But I would never participate in doing this to anyone, you know. Another thing yesterday is, I'll just tell you this quickly because it made me laugh. I was walking, I was nearly back to where I live. I called it home in the last video, and I take that back. It's not my home, it's just a place where I live. But it was a slip of the tongue. And these two guys came out of the house, and one of them kind of mumbled something, and the other one said, you know, they made sure they were timed it perfectly as I walked past, and then they were walking behind me, you know, close behind me. These two fat, fucking greasy looking cunts. And one of them mumbled, and the other one said, what did you say? And he goes, you know, it's all right there, it's all rehearsed. The actors, the role players. And he goes, I was just talking to myself. And he goes, oh. The other one starts laughing. He goes, you nutter, you absolute nutter. Oh, you're crazy. Everyone thinks you're crazy, you know. Everyone can see that you're nuts. And he's carrying on saying this as he's walking behind me, you know. Like, obviously thinking it's going to bother me. It doesn't in the slightest. I always have in the back of my mind, if these people are doing this to me, it's because they can't break me, so they have to come at me from all angles and say this shit. You know, I take that as a positive. If they weren't doing anything to me, it's because I would be already broken. But they have to come against me as hard as they can, because they know that I know what they're doing. I can see through their shite. They're jealous, they're obsessed, they're retarded, they're fucked up in the head, you know. Anyway, that's all for now. It's my rant for the day. Take care. God bless. God bless to you real people out there. Lots of love. Bye bye.